I'm going to detail some CNC work on how to do curved framing. So I've got a curved wall, it's got a curve at the top, and it's got this arch curve. So we've got two different curves I'm going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make some reference boxes because I want to do a 3/8 for bendy ply and then my 2.5 inch for framing. So I'm going to make a couple of reference boxes to kind of help me do those dimensions, and I'm going to put that right here. That's my 3/8 box, and then I want one for 2.5 inch for my framing, right? And doing it as a box means I just don't have to think about which way it goes and how that happens, right? So now I've got those. Those are great. I put those on layer 1. I'm working on layer 1. This is on my reference layer. I'm going to copy this to layer 1 at this point, and then I'm going to turn off my reference layer. I don't want to mess with my reference layer. I want to just leave it as something that I can go back to reference. So now I go into my node edit mode, and I go by hitting N, and then I can cut right at those two nodes. Because what I'm doing is I want to isolate the top of this line, because I want to duplicate this shape a couple of times. So I'm going to take this, Control C, Control V, right? Copy and paste. I'm going to do that a lot. And I'm going to make this shape. All right, so I've got that. Now I can move that away. Now you see it doesn't have ends. I'm going to fix that after a bit here. So I'm going to take this shape now, because I want my 2.5 inch. And I'm going to pop to those points there. Now, I probably don't need this anymore, so I can actually use this to do one of the ends, right? So if the scissor tool likes me, yeah, there it goes. And then otherwise, you can just use the polyline tool, which is right here. And if you click, you should be, it should go right to those nodes. And look, it's dragging that. I can hit my space bar and say, hey, I don't want you to I don't want you to continue that line, because I want to start a new line. And I'm going to do the new one right here. Space bar again. And then there's that. Now you want to make sure that these shapes are closed, because right now they're all individual lines, right? So I've got that. It's got the end. It's already closed. I'm going to close that to open to a closed one, and I'm going to close up this shape as well. So just make sure all that stuff's selected. 4 open to 1 closed. There it is. So that's all joined together. Now, I want to do a 3/8 reveal at the top of my shape, because that's going to be, and I'm doing this for both Hollywood and Broadway style, because just because it's a flat surface doesn't mean you can't have dimensionality to it. Of course you can. This is theater. We're all about cheating and making fake things look real. So if you want to make it 12 inches to come back, that's just a 12-inch reveal on that plywood. And bendy ply is great, and then the rest of it's flat, except for maybe your reveal inside here, which is what we're going to approach next, because look at that, that looks great. All right, so for this, I'm going to copy and paste this over here, because I want to do a different thing, and I want to show you why it's good for the inner arch, but not so much for the top arch of this shape. So for this, I'm going to select this, and I'm going to do an offset here. And I'm going to do an inward offset of 3/8 of an inch, again for my bendy plywood, and there it creates that new bendy shape. The reason I didn't want to do it at the top here is it does the whole thing and it comes in. So I'd have to clip this and continue this. It doesn't make as much sense, because then I have to fix a lot more. All right, so now I'm on the new shape. I want to go in again 2.5 inches for my framing setup, right? So that looks great. So now I want to isolate these vectors in here so that it's just the shape I need and I don't need the whole wall. So for that, I'm just going to make a box. I'm going to take this box and I'm going to extend it here, and then that's great, and now I can just grip the other side and extend it that way. Now for all the remaining vectors, I go and I use my little scissor tool and make them go away. And look at that, I've got all the vectors I need. Okay, so I still want to isolate the it made a little weird line up there at the top. I don't know why, but we're going to get rid of that real quick. I still want to isolate the 3/8 bendy ply from the framing. So I'm going to do this where I copy and paste again. So I have two things, and one of them I'm going to make my 3/8 ply. There's that. And the other one I'm going to make my framing, right? So now I've got those pieces, and they're independent from each other again. Just put them back together the way they were. And then I can take this whole setup of CNC part and bring it over here. And I'm going to grip it at the bottom of the arch because that's what's going to match the top of the designer's framing layout. So from here, should be able to start. I wanted to put everything together so that my jamb uprights and my outside uprights, everything can start going in. And so from here, I can start differentiating between a setup for Hollywood framing or for Broadway framing. So then that's when I can start making some changes. But this is my initial setup to get going. All right, for Broadway style framing for curves, start doing, so I've got a 2.5 inch and I don't know, it's 30 inches. But I need these, I need one up here, right? And you can see that's going to do something weird there. We'll deal with that in a minute. Control C, Control V. I'm going to take another one. I'm going to put it down here. I'm not going to snap terribly careful right now. Control C, Control V. Same thing over here. Snap to that side because I want it to go up that way. Again, those are for my jams. Control C, Control V, and then the other side. Now I'll still have to worry about the height of breadsticks being 8 feet, and then I'll have to accommodate for that. But right now, that's not what I'm after. What I'm after right now is the CNC parts. So I'll deal with those first, and then I'll come back and deal with the rest. So this is just the first approach to it. So I need it to come all the way up to this part here and into it a little bit, maybe, if even, because I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with that. I probably will do one for the center, just because I like ones in the center of the archway, the door top. I don't know, it just makes a nicer construction. So I'll put one there too. You can see that's way bigger than I need it to be, so I'll just bring that down. And then this is just, you know, nice functions and being able to move things around. All right, so the true beauty here is that we can maintain this 2.5 inches of structure for the most part. We don't have to make this thing crazy bigger than we need to. And then we can just use our node edit tool to modify that so that we, here, I'm going to actually insert a point, so, or I'll just bring this one down. That works the same way. But I need some way of like locking this in, right? So maybe if I bring this down, now I've got a big wide surface to be able to put some corrugated fasteners in and make that a much bigger, better location to put in place. So same thing over here. I can just drag it, and then I want to do on both sides this time, right? Because I want it to really lock in some sort of nice feature here. And maybe I want to make that, well, maybe I just want to make that go away, delete. And so I make that a shape that really fits for the corrugated fasteners. And for the most part, my frame remains 2.5 inches, except for those areas where I need these let-ins so that this face pieces can come together. So I'm just going to do the same thing all around, and then we'll deal with these little notches over here on the sides, and then we'll start a framing layout. All right, so here I've fixed the framing so it lets in these pieces, and then I move those pieces over to a reference layer so you can see what's going on. Now before I go further, and I did the same trick down here, so before I go further, I move these onto a reference layer so you could quickly turn them off. So I'm going to stay on layer 1. And the reason you want to do this is because the CNC is not going to create a square shape like that. It just won't do it. So they did allow you this fillet option here, and so I'm going to do it for a 1/4 inch tool. I'm going to do the dog bone. And so anywhere where you have one of those sharp corners, you want to round it over, because the bit will do this. It'll follow the profile, and the bit will give that little rounded nubbin. It'll kind of do a little push in on each of those little spots. And so as it does that, it has room for your square shape to go into place. And so let's take a look at that real quick before we go any further. And there it is. So you got your square shape going into place, and so it'll get a nice tight fit. All right, so the next bit will be to do a let in over here, because right now it's going through the whole frame, which, okay, you want it to come into the frame, but you want to have a way of like locking it together. So we'll probably do some corrugated fastener bit there, and so we just need a little bit of a structure to allow us to do that. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to free draw this shape. I'm going to go from this spot here up to here, and I'm going to make it however wide that is. How wide is that? That's 0.6. So we're going to make that 0.75, and we're just going to let that be that shape. And so here, well, for some reason this whole thing is off a little bit. So we'll shift it into place and kind of make our allowances there. Not sure why that's happening. We'll fix it though. And we're just gonna move it right there. Okay, so I want this to be over here. And it's probably gonna have to stretch a little bit more because I changed the position of that piece. Now, this part right here is the 3/8 bit, but this part here is what I actually want. So I can just delete that, and I've got my reference line, which is good. That's all I really needed. Although I probably wanted to save that 3/8 for a reference of, we'll move that to the reference layer, I guess. All right, now we'll turn off the reference layer because we don't need it. So back on layer 1. So now I've got this that I want to add to that part. Again, I can just go over here to my little scissor tool, and I'm going to square off this whole shape, and there it is. And then I'm going to connect the two things by cutting out that middle bit. I'm going to turn my layer back on so you can see what I've done. And so now I've created this little squared off bit to go into a dado on this framing piece, right? And so the dado I can cut square. This whole shape I can cut on the CNC, and that's going to work out great for me. I just need to replicate this on the other side, and then I'm going to start worrying about my framing layout, and then bringing these pieces down and adding in things like that, and start thinking about sheet goods. So that'll be where we pick up next. All right, so I've laid in some framing and 2-foot on centers and some sheet goods to kind of figure out some positions of that. I kind of modified this a little bit and put those in place. So that's my sheet goods. I made a layer for those. I'm going to turn that off right now so you can see my framing. So now we're restricted by the 8-foot length of the framing. So I'm going to stay on my reference layer, and I'm just going to go back through and make some seam breaks. I like a diagonal break on these types of seams because then it gives me a way to additionally nail those parts together. So I need at least one there and one somewhere over here. And that way I can adequately support them front and back. It looks like these I'll also need some kind of seam break. Again, maybe over here, space bar to continue the command, somewhere over here maybe. And you can check those lengths and make sure that those work out for you, because you do need to be able to splice those pieces together. So finally, we're going to put our CNC'd components into our layout space. So this was just for that purpose of making sure we had 8-foot lengths. So now I'm going to turn off the reference layer. I'm going to go back to working in layer 1. And now I know this piece is longer than 8 feet. So I need to break it up into at least 2 parts. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to use that same command with the draw polyline because it's a quick, easy way to make this happen. Right? Escape will get me out of the command. And now I'm just going to Control C, Control V, the whole thing. So I've got the whole thing twice. So now I want to make this lower component, so I erase the upper component, right? Just clip, clip, clip. So now I need the upper component, so I'm going to remove the lower component. Clip, clip, clip. All right, and those should have joined those back up, so now I can just move the one part back onto the other part. And look at that, now I've got the whole thing. If I turn my reference layer back on, hey, look, there it is, no problem. All right, so I want to apply some labels before I move this onto the CNC layout area. So I'm going to create a text. I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to call this P1 for part 1. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just doing this for the purposes of making things quick and easy. P2 part 2. And I did already apply a label here, but I'm going to change that from CNC to part 3. And so now these are ready to lay out into this space down here. So I'm going to grab them, Control C, Control V, and then drag them into space. So the first thing I want to do is grab the first part, and then I'm going to rotate it, which there's a rotate command right here. I'm going to rotate by 1 degree at a time and just hold Enter until I get what I want. If I go too far, -1, there we go. And then I'm going to take this part and put it right over here toward the edge of the sheet so I've got more sheet to go. Now I can grab this next part. Do the same thing, rotate command, 1 degree, rotate, rotate, rotate. And then that looks good. I'm going to grab that part and just move it into space as well. So that's part 2, and we'll know how those go together. And then finally, I'm going to take this last one. Remember, 0 and 9 will rotate. I'm going to take that and put it up into space. And there it is, right? And now because this is a Broadway flat, I've only got the one side. So all I've got all my CNC components. I only need the 3. So I've got that in place. I can bring in my sheet goods layout if I want to have that as a reference to work off of. Otherwise, I don't have to have that. Bring it in and do the rest of the work in AutoCAD, but I can send file, export, DXF, and export this whole drawing, and it'll have all of my framing, all my sheet layout ready to go, and then I'll be ready to start press pulling into the 3/4 inch dimension and making the rest of the shapes work. So there it is, and you should be ready to rock and roll. Before you finish rock and rolling, I wonder if anybody caught the fact that I put a 3/8 reveal here, but didn't put a 3/8 reveal on the side. So one reason to do that is if you have a independent door jamb that sits behind the flat, which is a good idea because then you can stabilize the door jamb separate from the wall. So if somebody slams the door, you can make the jamb more rigid, but then your reveal should be on the jamb to make that work. If it's just an opening, then yeah, the framing should probably be back that 3/8 so you have something to go along with the whole thing. But I wanted to point that out in case there was anybody that noticed that one.